A daughter in Death's image. Here's a look at the new boss fight studio, Court of the Dead, Kier, Valkyrie of the Dead. Born the vestigial twin to a Valkyrie of heaven, Keir was broken and incomplete, an abomination in the eyes of the heavenly host, and so she was cast into the void between the realms to wither and die. This is where death found her, and within her pitiful form saw a reflection of what he once had been, a helpless and lost child unwanted by both the powers of heaven and of hell. And so, for the first time in many of an age, death raised a new creation by his own hands, a loyal daughter who could stand by his side. She became the Valkyrie of the Dead, a warrior who serves the court of the dead by scavenging the unwanted souls broken by the battlefield and giving them a new purpose, a chance at redemption within the ranks of Death's secret army. Now let's not go making a deal with Death anytime soon before we get a closer look at Keir, the Valkyrie of the Dead. I'd like to thank the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that did provide this sample that we could have a look at in this video. We're going to go ahead now and figure out just how tall Keir stands. Starting things first, let's look at inches. The figure including the horns of her headdress. She stands at around 4 inches in height, or the figure's about 10 centimeters tall. Then, to compare her with another Court of the Dead alumni, let's move over Keir that we're going to have a look at in this video, and bring in Gethsemane, that we looked at in an earlier video. Now, I don't know if you can actually tell, based on the fact that their armor is going to be a little bit different from one another, that they seem to be sharing the same bodies. And don't let just the fact that they are using the same bodies deter you from wanting to pick up this line. Though they are using the same mold, yes, Boss Fight Studio are quite creative with what they can add to those existing bodies. As you can see, the armor and the color application between the two figures are worlds apart. Keir comes included with a display stand we'll have a look at first. It's been all molded, yes, in black plastic, but then they've added the additional deco of the blue swirled around the peg points in the center that's going to plug to the underside of Keir's feet. As I did say in the review when we had a look at Gethsemane, if you look at the size of the pegs, and you look at then the size of the holes on the underneaths of her feet, it seems like the pegs are always a little bit bigger. Anytime it involved me having to put them onto the display stand, I first sort of had to take the stand and almost twist the peg onto the feet and make the hole just a slight bit bigger. Once you get the figure, though, on the display stand, she stands fine. Although, really, to be fair, she stood fine anyways without the display stand necessary. Putting the figure right there. I say that now, and of course getting the figure to stand appropriately. There we go. Just to show you the difference of display stands, sliding in the one that came included with Gethsemane. Yeah, it does look like they are using the same stand, at least from a mold standpoint, but the different deco is definitely noticeable between the two. I'm going to put those to the side. The figure also comes included with a couple of swappable hands. As of right now, she has the means to hold the included sword that we'll look at in a second. But if you prefer to have your figures with finger gestures, then these hands are best for the job. These hands can easily just unpeg from the sockets of the forearms, which I'll do in a second. First, though, I did also want to show you guys the sword that she comes included with. I think it's a really neat-looking sword. Spin it around so you can see it from the top. You can see there's a skull making up the center section of the guard. And it sort of looks like there's smaller little tiny hands or skeletons all connected to one another. It looks like all these little bodies are sort of reaching out from the center section of the sword. The hilt is done in black, and then just above that you can actually see it could be the Angel of Death right on the very top of the hilt. Very interesting looking sword. I also like the way that they've airbrushed the darker black just above the guard as it gets into the silver of the blade. It's a softer plastic, or not super soft, but soft enough that at least that you can do this with no risk of it breaking. As it currently goes right now, the figure does have the means to hold the sword, as she does have 2 gripping hands. The plastic on all these hands I've noticed so far is pretty soft, so you shouldn't have to heat these up at all in order for her to properly hold the sword. She holds it just perfectly fine. Again, if you did want to change the hands out, though, let's go ahead and actually just change this hand. It doesn't really matter which hand you're going to change, but just to hold on to the forearm, you're going to wiggle the hand and remove the peg from the forearm. And once you've done that, then go ahead and take that whatever hand you want to use. Probably would be best to use the hand that has the proper thumb. Go ahead and just take the hand and wiggle it back into place. Super, super easy to change the hands. And now you got yourself a gestured pose. The figure does also have wings. Now, as of right now, it's hard to put the wings in place because she does actually have a cape, a softer cape, that covers over the holes that are located on the back of her torso. See, you can see it right there on both the sides. There's a stain of blood actually where the wings, I guess, would have been ripped right off. I think that's a really interesting and eerie touch that they added to the back of Keir's body. Now, we're going to remove the cape here in a second. First, though, I did want to show you guys the head sculpt that she starts with, as she has two different heads available. There's this one that does have the skull face. Whenever I think of Keir, it's always this head sculpt, the one at least that has the skull, that has the horns. One horn more broken than the other, but the horns are sticking out from the top of the headdress. She does also have this alternate head sculpt too. And this one basically is just the same face, really, with the same glowing eyes and the notable little lines that they've painted underneath her lips. The hair, I'm just going to spin this around here for a second, the hair seems also very similar, although just only on mine, it looks like the one strand is just kind of just trailing off to the side, right? I mean, it looks like the strand length are the exact same between the two. To change the head out, we're going to go ahead and just remove the head, and it's actually quite easy. Just hold onto the torso, and wiggle it back and forth, and just unpeg it. And when you unpeg it, you'll notice that the ball peg goes along with the head. Don't worry, because the alternate head also has the ball joint, so that's going to stay behind anyways. Just bring it out just a little bit. Oh, and I guess before we actually attach that into place, you could take the cape and remove it completely and put that to the side. Just quickly looking at how good the cape is. All these torn and tattered bottom sections of the cape. It really looks like an interesting looking cape. The only thing I would have probably added is just a little bit of discoloration on the bottom, but that's just more cosmetic than anything else. I'm going to put the cape to the side. And now we can actually take the figure and spin it around and locate it on the back, the eerie remains of where the wings would have been. You can then take these wings. These are translucent blue plastic, and you're going to just attach them into place. Just take the first wing, just wiggle it in place, and pop it into the torso. Now, these are on hinges. The problem is, though, that they are plastic, like clear, translucent plastic. I worry long-term whether they'd be cracking, but for the time being, they seem to be fine. I don't know if I would be hinging these all that frequently, just because, again, the hinge joint is the same translucent plastic that makes up the rest of the wing as well. And again, we're just going to plug those in place. Unlike Gethsemane, that really had one distinct look going for her, Keir does have technically two different ways of displaying the figure. And again, we'll just attach those wings in place. There we go. That looks really interesting. I like the way that came out. And then we could go ahead and then replace the head. We could have technically done this the other way around and popped the head in first and then added the wings, but I decided to do it the other way around instead. Just pop the head in place, make sure it's far enough in there. And that's what Keir looks like now with the wings and the alternate head sculpt. Just to see where we came from, though, this is what she actually looked like with the skull mask. I still think I like the skull mask myself, but I do appreciate the fact that Boss Fight Studio did give you an alternate way of displaying the figure. And yeah, you can still have her obviously displayed with the sword instead. Nice looking figure. The color on this one is really good. We had more of the chalk white when we looked at Gethsemane, but here we actually are treated to more of a purple-based blue for the majority of her skin. The eyes, though being similar in shade, actually stand out rather nicely. They're kind of almost the same coloring as her wings themselves, and the wings themselves actually look like they're just made of energy. I think that's really, really cool. She does have the lower skirting as well as the armor bodice that she has are both removable, so you can actually take these off if you want to. Obviously, underneath that, there's going to be no clothing. Really nice detail done to the bodice itself. You can see there's a center skull right in the middle there, right up covering over her belly button. And it seems also like there's a sword right above that. The attention to detail, factoring in how small these figures are, Boss Fight's doing just an incredible job on all of these Court of the Dead figures that at least we've looked at so far. Other things that she does have, Keir does have the staining of her arms. The arms start in a crimson red and continue their way up the forearm until, as you can see, they sort of transition and taper off until you get the coloring of the blue here. It's more of a transition as you get lower down to the legs. They start with the blood red in the feet, and as you get marginally up the calf, you can see it sort of airbrushes its way out. I really like the transition in color that they end up going with here. For the articulation now on Keir, again, the head is going to be still on that same ball joint, so it's going to allow the head to look down, look up, and it also moves back and forth. She seems to have more flexibility in the way that you can actually rotate her head, unlike the Gethsemane that we looked at earlier. The wings, as we already looked at, does have technically poseability. There's a hinge joint right there. And the way they're also pegged in place too. You can also hinge them back and forth. Technically, I suppose you could also have the wings folded down. But again, you're just going to want to be careful folding those hinge joints, such as because, again, they're using a translucent plastic. You can take as well the arms, and as is the case before we looked at Gethsemane, you can rotate those arms all the way around. You can also hinge them out. And she has a similar joint also happening in the forearm, where you can bend the elbow there. The forearm also allows the forearm to rotate in the same place as the joint for the elbow, and you can also rotate the hand all the way around as well. Upper torso is on a ball joint. It's kind of a little harder to get in there, but there's a ball joint actually underneath the bodice. And then she does also have a swivel cut just above her waist, just above the skirting here. You can split the legs. You can bring those out. You can take the legs as well and bring them forward and back. And because they've allotted for enough space on both the sides of Keir's skirting, no problems at all moving the legs out, nor is there a problem moving the legs forward and back. 3/4 of the way up the thigh. Once again, you've got your swivel cut. You can swivel that back and forth. The figure does have a double hinge on the knee. And then she does have, again, that articulation and ankle rocker in the feet. The hardest part for me, I mean, when we looked at Gethsemane, it was pretty cut and dry. It was Gethsemane with very few in the way of interchangeable parts, other than just swappable hands. Though this one does have now some additional weight. Let's, you know what, let's go ahead and bring in the display stand here. That's what it's there for after all. We're going to go ahead and attach the figure onto our display stand. Wiggle it onto the post. And that might actually make things a little bit more stable when it comes to standing the figure. Yeah, again, like she's going to be a little bit more back heavy. You know what we may even have to do is attach the feet to both the pegs. I was only really attaching the figure to one of the pegs and thought that was more than enough, but maybe for the case here of Keir, we might actually have to attach her on both the pegs just to get her properly stand. As I was saying, though, when you compared her against the Gethsemane was pretty cut and dry. She didn't have much in the way of swappable parts other than just really swappable hands. And we can also, again, bring in the little tiny imp that came included with her. The problem with a character like Kier is that she has now available options. Not only can you change out the head, but you can decide for yourself to display her with either the cape or the wings. I kind of am leaning a little more towards the wings. Even though traditionally when I think of Kier, I think of her more as the cape with the skull mask. But I guess I really like the idea that Boss Fight Studio incorporated not only a swappable head sculpt, but also the means to add wings on the back of her torso as well. Even though traditionally I think of Keir as the character with the long cape and the skull mask, you know, Boss Fight Studio, I think, have won me over for this alternate look that they provided with the figure. Just a simple swap out, changing out the cape, popping in these translucent wings, changing out the head sculpt. You really have a radically different design for Keir. And I got to say, like, how good this looks right now. I can't see myself ever going back to the way that Keir started with, the way she was first taken out of the packaging. I mean, it's almost a night and day comparison, but the look of these translucent wings, I think, are way too good to now take off of the figure. And this is going to be the way I'm going to have the figure displayed moving forward. Now, as of right now, we've already looked at Gethsemane and Keir. There's, of course, other characters that make up the Court of the Dead. Time will certainly tell as to whether Boss Fight Studio are planning to release any more characters, alumni of the Court of the Dead. You got to imagine, if they've already released now Gethsemane and now released Keir, you got to believe they've got plans for other characters moving forward. If this is any bit of an indication as to what they've got planned for future Court of the Dead, then sign me on board. I've always been a big fan of Court of the Dead, and based on what we've seen so far from Gethsemane and Keir, I think the smaller scale representation of these characters are in good hands, thanks to the folks over at Boss Fight Studio. Certainly, just to throw this out to you guys, the viewing audience, which way, if you had picked up this figure, would you display the figure? Would you display it with the cape and the skull mask, or would you now display it with the wings and this alternate head sculpt? Let me know down below in the comments section. A big thank you once again to the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that did provide this sample of Keir we could have a look at in this video. What do you guys also, if you are interested to pick this one up for yourself, I would imagine it would start popping up anytime now online if you guys are looking to pick up and start really collecting the Court of the Dead in smaller scale figures. And also, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you guys are seeing, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Turn the bell notification on so you're always going to get those reminders every single time a new video is popping up, Boss Fight Studio or otherwise. And if you certainly would like to see more from what Boss Fight Studio have been doing over the years, at the very end of this video, popping up will be a playlist that will cover off all the territory, not really Court of the Dead related, but certainly will cover off everything that Boss Fight Studio, at least what I've looked at here on this channel, everything that Boss Fight Studios have released and what I've looked at here on this channel. Feel free to check out, yes, the playlist. There's definitely going to be a lot more Boss Fight Studio reviews coming your way. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.